Hurry Up Tomorrow absolutely bombs at the box office. This is the weekend's new movie, and everybody's kind of ragging on it. Then Final Destination Bloodlines exceeds all expectations, makes over $50 million domestically, over $100 million internationally, and other news and pop culture. And this is Live with the Guy every day at 12 p.m. Central Time. Why don't you say hi, Nat?
Hello.
That's my producer. She's off camera, switching and reading articles in a nice AI voice for us. Okay, before we get into this, maybe I'll say I watched a couple of my episodes back, and I was speaking a little bit too quickly, so I'll try to slow down my cadence a little bit, but God, it's going to be hard to do. Okay, now this Hurry Up Tomorrow, I hadn't heard about it until we went out to dinner the other day, and playing on the TV there was a trailer of this movie, and I told Nat, well, that looks pretty good. Maybe we should see that. And then come Monday, which was today, Pop Culture Crisis came out with a review of the movie, and man, was this ended up being a horrible movie.
Pop Culture Crisis or Film Threat?
Pop Culture Crisis.
Oh.
But every single person online is absolutely destroying this movie. Clips of The Weeknd are going around like hotcakes. This guy cannot act. His voice is too soft. He's overly emotional and everything. Did you have any thoughts about this?
Well, I've never liked The Weeknd. I don't understand the hype. I don't like his music. I don't like him as a person. I think he's pretty gross. And every other thing he's tried to do film-wise or series-wise has failed. So I don't know why people expected this to be any better. And then there's Jenna Ortega, who's the fake Latina, who's more American than anything else.
Well, we have another channel called Nat and the Guy in Espanol. We were broadcasting from Mexico City. Didn't you do a video about fake Latinas the other day?
A few months ago I did, yeah. And Jenna Ortega is one of the main ones.
Okay, well, I thought this movie might actually be good because the trailer, all the money was really put into the trailer and the promotions of this movie. The actual film itself had a rating of 0 on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics, and that was 14 critics that had scored it. I had never seen a 0 on Rotten Tomatoes. As far as the audience score goes, it didn't do much better. It had 15%, but I guess 15% is better than 0. And that being said, if you're asking why is this movie so bad, well, I didn't know until I heard on Pop Culture Crisis that this movie was actually written by The Weeknd. And it's about a musician, and it's supposed to go along with his last album that is entitled the same thing, Hurry Up Tomorrow. And man, he should have just left it to the music video, I think.
And it's basically like he did the same thing with The Idol. They're all like ego projects to boost up his ego. And I don't understand why they keep giving him money. And he has this whole epic saga where he's made, I think it's 3, this is the 3rd album or 3 or 4 albums where he's telling this story of like his rebirth, and it's all about him and how he has evolved as an artist. Nobody cares. I really don't like this man.
Well, I also think they built him up as one of the largest Canadian audiences, and it cost a lot of money to build a Canadian artist up once you have one. It's good to kind of have them because Canadian radio stations and things like Netflix need a certain amount of Canadian content for that market, but it also appeals to the U.S. market in a broad spectrum. So maybe it's just going to be hard to build up another Canadian artist to this guy's level, I guess. I actually don't mind his music. I like his music. I just, as an actor, after watching some of the clips, it made me cringe.
Well, as a person, he's too self-involved.
Why don't you read a little bit about the movie, and then we'll go into a movie that actually did do fairly successful this weekend, which was Final Destination's Bloodline.
Sure. So it's from Collider, so take it with a grain of salt, but even they're hating on it. So it isn't unusual for pop stars to transition to cinema after a certain stage in their careers. Often these pivots end up serving both their music and acting journeys, but it appears that The Weeknd, who is trying to reclaim his given name, Abel Tesfaye, and bury his current onstage persona, will have to try again after failing a second time this week. Tesfaye headlined the musical thriller Hurry Up Tomorrow, which opened to terrible reviews and tanked at the box office. He previously starred in the controversial HBO series The Idol, which was canceled after a disastrous debut season a couple years ago. On both occasions, his performance was singled out for criticism by both fans and critics. Directed by Trey Edward Schultz, Hurry Up Tomorrow sees the pop star playing an exaggerated version of himself on screen. He played a musician in The Idol as well. The show holds a rotten 19% score on Rotten Tomatoes. Hurry Up Tomorrow has somehow failed to cross this low bar. It's currently sitting on a 13% Rotten Tomatoes score, with Collider's Jeff Ewing writing in his review that the movie's underwritten script takes too long to get anywhere exciting, and it never stops feeling like a sidecar to the album instead of a standalone feature film.
Yeah, I'm thinking about something from my generation, a movie that may be a little bit like this, that just the whole movie looked like a music video and it didn't have any real depth, was the movie Belly with DMX and Nas. And they had a big time, I think it was Hype Williams at the time, a big time music video director direct a whole feature length movie, and it looked stunning. Although it didn't have the depth. It's funny that the Weeknd is playing basically himself. He's playing a musician and he can't even do that well. Clips are emerging of this other series he did called The Idol, and he was just as bad in that. They were kind of opposite characters. One was quiet spoken. The one in this movie is loud spoken. He can't act on either end of the spectrum. They shouldn't have let him write a movie. Somebody's pumping this guy full of smoke. And yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that movie. Anything before we move on?
Well, I think he's also trying really hard to be like Michael Jackson. Did Michael Jackson do a film that was basically a music video?
Yeah, but it was Thriller. Thriller, but I don't know if there was a full-length movie to go along with it. But
there was at least like a longer extended.
Yeah, there was an extremely long cut of that movie. And people did compare him to Michael Jackson early on in his career. What's her name? The girl I keep calling a witch.
Lady Gaga.
Oh, yeah, Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga was able to kind of transition over to movies fairly well. Even when she did a bad movie, she wasn't totally terrible in it. And when she did a good movie with what was the country movie with the main actor from The Hangover?
A Star is Born.
A Star is Born. That was it. She did very well in A Star is Born, and that was kind of, it worked perfect for a singer. It was a good transition into film for her. Then she did The Joker, a musical. At least she did a musical, but the movie itself, nobody wants to watch a musical of Batman. That going on. Hurry Up Tomorrow wasn't the only bad movie in box office this weekend. Everything seemed to do horrible, and that's the big news of the weekend, except for Final Destination Bloodline. It got almost half of the total box office for the weekend by itself. And so it made $51 million domestically, and it made over $100 million worldwide. People just want non-political movies that are scary movies. These are good date movies. I would say something like this is usually made straight for streaming, but horror movies typically can do pretty well in the theaters. Since this was the last of the main actors' final destinations, he was written out the script. It had a lot of hype behind it. The director directed it a little bit more intentionally, so it didn't quite look like a streaming movie. It's supposed to be a lot better. It got good reviews. So all the small things a movie needed to kind of do of this type, it did. And it not only did it, it was able to exceed all expectations. I'm not going to go watch this in theaters, but I am probably going to watch it when it comes on streaming. Do you have anything about? I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I'm actually really surprised at the numbers it's doing and how well it's doing, because I was not a big fan of this series. I watched the first couple because it was filmed in Vancouver and I could recognize a lot of the locations because we used to live in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just think it's the audience telling Hollywood what they want to see and what they're tired of.
Yeah. And I didn't manage to get, and I don't know why I didn't get the numbers for Mission Impossible, because we did go watch that this weekend.
But because it hasn't released officially yet.
Oh, they haven't?
No.
But all the other movies did the official releases?
Yeah, but Mission Impossible, well, when we went to watch it, it was a preview.
Oh, it was the preview. Oh, yeah, it doesn't
it's
come out
It's not officially out, yes.
Oh, so me and Nat went out to watch Mission Impossible, a pre-showing, I guess, in Mexico City. It was playing at a lot of the theaters in Mexico City, but it wasn't the wide release. So I guess the numbers will come out for next weekend.
Yes.
She really liked it. Why don't you talk about it? Because I didn't like it much at all. I liked the fact that there wasn't much politics in it, but
Well, I liked it because it did what it said in the box, essentially. So it was just an action film showing everything Tom Cruise can still do at his 62 years. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't looking for the plot or the narrative because I knew it wasn't going to be there.
Yeah, for me, it seemed a little bit overproduced, and it did less with more rather than more with less. I could really tell the editing. It would be dialogue, pause, cut, pause, dialogue, reaction. And you can see everything kind of just felt overly lit, overly scripted. I really felt like it was a movie. But after the movie was really, I think, choreographed or scripted around the two big stunt action scenes. And it did kind of draw you in after the first action scene, which was the dive scene. That being said, that was over an hour into the movie. So for the first hour, I didn't buy into it. And a lot of movies are only an hour and a half. This particular movie was almost 3 hours. It was a 2 hour and 50-minute runtime. I like the fact that politics were mainly left out of it. But the thing was, the president felt like it was a nod to Kamala Harris and they were expecting her to win.
But it wasn't, because that actress, Angela Bassett, was the CIA director in other movies. And she has been in other movies for Mission Impossible. So, I mean, I know they probably could have made, I don't know, Nick Offerman the one, because he's also been in other movies. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, yes, it might have been a nod, but it kind of makes more sense than just inserting her in the last movie to try to be Kamala Harris. At least she goes along with the story and has been part of the story for a long time.
And overall, I didn't mind going and supporting a movie like that with my money, because it will kind of tell Hollywood by voting with my dollars, we don't want this woke crap. We don't want this DEI crap. So it was just a traditional action movie. And people need to kind of let Hollywood know what they want. It's also very good. This Final Destination Bloodlines is doing well. They just want a good horror movie. Traditional movies that will appeal to the masses, I think.
And Rafa says, hi, guy.
Oh.
Or hey, guy.
How you doing? It's good to have you here. One other thing I was going to say, we did watch the previews on Mission Impossible. And I didn't like any of the previews except for F1. And that was with Brad Pitt. And who else was in there? The Spanish.
Oh, Javier Bardem.
How do you say it?
Javier Bardem.
Javier Bardem. I really do like him, even though I can't say his name. But it seemed to be a good duo. The movie looks really good overall, and it looks like a traditional type of Hollywood movie, high budget
action man.
I definitely either watch it on streaming or go to theaters to watch it. So, and you got a review, or not a review, but a pre-review of Mission Impossible coming out?
Yes, tonight. I'll talk about it tonight in the Spanish live. And then we'll probably talk about it in our English one here as well. And Rafa also says hello to my voice. So hello, Rafa.
Okay.
I don't know why my voice goes deeper when I'm not on camera.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It takes her 3 hours to get ready for the night show.
It does
so
not.
In the morning show, I kind of get her up and we don't put her on camera, but at least I get you reading the articles and talking to me.
Yes. Eventually you'll do your show by yourself.
Eventually. I still hate being on camera.
I'm your crutch.
I still get nervous. And when I was watching myself the other day, I was like, holy shit, I am talking a mile a minute. This is me trying to slow down. I still feel like I'm talking fast.
Yes. And usually during the day I'm editing, researching, etc. as well. So
okay, let's go into Sarah Silverman. And I made her the cover. I probably should have made The Weeknd, because The Weeknd's a lot more recognizable. But this story with Sarah Silverman actually goes along with a secondary article we'll talk about. Why don't you read the headline and then I'll talk about it a little bit.
So Sarah Silverman feels effing ignorant for using slurs and blackface in past comedy. And she keeps talking about this.
Yeah, and she's becoming irrelevant, and she just wants to virtue signal to Hollywood, so maybe they'll give her another role, because she hasn't done anything serious in a long time. She's getting older. She's aging out. She's extremely woke. She's buying into the woke when the whole culture is kind of shifting. If she wouldn't bring up this blackface thing or other ignorant jokes she did when she was younger, people don't care anymore. People will actually applaud her for like taking risks, I would say. The fact that she's apologizing for things she did in her past in an era before wokeness, nobody cares. And I think a lot of this stuff is going to come back, maybe not blackface, but she did a lot of edgy jokes. And when Sarah Silverman first came out, it was kind of before the woke era, and she was funny. And that's why I was so disappointed to see her go so far downhill.
And she was one of the first comedians, I believe, other than maybe Tina Fey, that started that whole woman self-deprecating humor, but in a way where it's like, oh, I got my period. Oh, I bled all over the place. Like gross female comedy, which I don't think any females actually liked, but they were forced to kind of go into it because of the whole feminism thing.
Yeah.
And that it was so refreshing to see a woman talk about her period and her issues and being gross. And then all the rest of the female comedians followed. And it was like this empowerment feminism thing. But I don't think it was good.
Yeah, and I think I'm a little bit older than you. So when she first rose, she was big. She had great delivery. She was great. And then comedy changed. Wokeism came in. The political landscape changed. And she was on the wrong side of all of it and really destroyed her career. I think if none of that had come in and really influenced the things she talked about and the things she did, she could have been probably one of the best female comedians today. Because that being said, there's not a lot of good female comedians. Matter of fact, I can't name any.
I can name the annoying ones that do all that gross comedy stuff.
But do you know any female comedian that you actually find funny right now?
That I find funny? No.
Yeah.
But that I know that are annoying and talk about being disgusting, essentially doing gross comedy. Yes, all of them. Amy Schumer, Eliza Schlesinger, this girl, that other one that passed out while she was doing a bit about being all boosted and jabbed, and then she passed on stage, passed out on stage, blacked out. Yes, I know them, but I don't watch them.
Yeah, and another thing I was going to say, all the male comedians could read the room and they have enough confidence to invest in themselves, whether it was Joe Rogan making his own podcast. I know that was decades ago, but he really read the room and invested in himself. Other comedians are really going into the online podcast space and releasing their own specials. They're no longer relying on studios. And as they get success in the independent space and build their fan base, it pressures studios into giving them larger projects. So they have the power in the relationship between the comedian and the studio. Females just aren't taking risks on themselves, either because they're not funny or they don't believe in themselves.
And I mean, love him or hate him, I think the rise of Matt Rife, especially his success amongst female women, shows and proves that women aren't looking for that feminist comedy anymore. And they're willing to pay a lot of money to go see a very handsome guy, according to them, make fun of them and make fun of just life in general, instead of talking about female issues.
Well, when you bought into this all this political undertone comedy, whether it was feminism or women being gross so we can empower women, things like this, it had the add-on effect of destroying comedy, and that's why people don't want to support that kind of comedy. It ended up saying, oh, you can't make jokes about this. You can't make jokes about that. It put boundaries on comedy. Nobody wants to see boundaries on comedy. We don't mind seeing somebody tell a bad joke or an inappropriate joke and having them bomb and even getting booed off stage. But we don't want to have comedians not tell jokes anymore because it's politically incorrect. I remember Eddie Murphy when he first came up. I mean, he became cookie cutter Eddie Murphy later on in his career with all these Disney movies. But man, him and Richard Pryor really pushed the boundaries, and that was back in the 80s. What we have today in today's comedy is so milquetoast, it's not even funny anymore, even when it is funny.
And what people forget is that to be a good comedian, you have to be very smart. Comedians are very, very intelligent people. And when they're not, it's very clear.
I'm glad you said that point because I watch a ton of debates, and typically leftists get blown out in debates because they don't have those tools sharpened. But I have been seeing leftists become better and better and better, and the progressives that are debating now, there have been actually a couple of leftist comedians. Whether they're good comedians or not, I don't know, but a comedian has to be quick-witted all the time, and he has to be willing to take risks and fail and put ideas out there. And comedians make very, very good debaters. Who's that one gentleman that I watched that debated Douglas Murray the other day?
I have no idea.
On the Joe Rogan Experience?
Dave Smith?
Oh, yeah, Dave Smith. Dave Smith is probably one of the best political commentators. If you watch his show, man, he is not afraid to go his own way and really give a good analysis of different situations on the ground. As a comedian, I've actually never seen him as a comedian. So, okay, let's go into the next story.
Oh, and Rafa says, but she regrets appearing on that Steel Panther video, Sarah Silverman.
What's the steer? I don't know what that was. Okay, let's go into the next one's a similar story.
So yes, Michael Che apologizes to Scarlett Johansson after SNL vulgar joke about her body.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the joke because I don't want to get taken off YouTube here. But again, he shouldn't be apologizing. And he should be apologizing less than Sarah Silverman. He's not writing these jokes, or at least he's not writing a lot of them. It's a full writer's room on SNL. So the fact that he's getting paid millions of dollars to tell these jokes, don't apologize for him. Or if he does want to apologize in public or in private, one-to-one.
I think because of, again, going back to the whole feminist comedy, gross comedy thing, women allowed, or female comedians allowed, all of these also gross jokes to be told by men, because it opened the door to this new feminist, let's talk about body parts, let's talk about women as if they're, because us as women are doing it too, so like now men can do it. And I don't think that door should have ever been opened, because it stops being comedy and it starts being like a desperate attempt to kind of fit in. So the joke he made, and you can kind of read it here I'm not going to say it because it's gross and because it mentions a woman's body parts, but I think that comes in from the writers, probably female writers, saying, oh yes, this is so funny because we're talking about, female body parts, gross comedy, and it's not.
That would be a scandal. I mean, comedian writers' room used to be all guys, and that's why they're saying a lot of network TV comedy is not funny anymore, because of the DEI push to push female into primarily male writer spaces where males can't really tell jokes. And imagine if this was a female writer that wrote this joke potentially, and then he has to say it on TV, and then he potentially gets canceled for it.
Yes.
I also think that brings up another issue. What happens if female writers are intentionally writing jokes to get male comedians canceled?
Maybe, but I think they're also just trying to push the boundaries between like decency and morality, and trying to make, once again, women the same as men, which they're not.
Yeah, they're different.
And that's why people get shocked by these kinds of things. Like it brings back reality to these few feminist comedian writers, or whatever they are, the ones that probably wrote this joke. It brings back reality to them to say, oh, the public isn't where we are at. They're not as involved or empowered as we are.
Yeah.
But it's just that the public doesn't want that.
No.
Because they know it's wrong. And also there's this whole new story coming out about Scarlett Johansson saying how she regrets being objectified and treated as a S object for so long. So we'll probably talk about it tonight as well.
Well, they're trying to build her up as the next feminist icon. We watched Jurassic Park trailer during the Mission Impossible, and man, it seemed like the scientist should have been a female, and the main action hero was Scarlett Johansson. It seemed like that.
Yeah, the roles were very clearly switched around. Yeah. But I will say she did look good, and she did fit the role as far as a woman. If you are going to put a woman in that role, I guess that's as good as you can get, but still not 100% believable. Yes. And Rafa says Steel Panther is a glam metal band with extremely and misogynistic lyrics.
Oh, that's great.
And
I like stuff like that.
Walker here as well, says the best joke for Scarlett was when they booed her at that football stadium. Lol.
Well, Walker's here. Rafa must be leaving in a few minutes. They're usually on opposite schedules.
Yes.
Okay, let's go into the next story, which was Steve Bannon, I believe.
No.
Oh, no. Oh, FDA? Okay. What? Oh, here it is. Yeah. Why don't you read the headline and then we'll go into it.
So FDA, so the Food and Drug Administration of the U.S., okays first blood test that can help diagnose Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, and this is great if it actually works. So, but I'm wondering, is there an Alzheimer's medication coming out? And then they want this, a lot of people are going to start being diagnosed with this, and they're going to go right into a streamline of pharmaceuticals for people, lifelong patients and things like that.
Yeah, and there's also been, like, on the outskirts of medicine and the, not alternative, but like the scientists that left or were canceled out, have been coming out with a lot of hypotheses about Alzheimer's and what causes it, and if it has anything to do with proteins and fats and also other chemicals that might be impacting human bodies that we're not fully aware of. So it's interesting that, probably a medicine coming out, and also why now?
Oh, yeah. Also, I'm going to say, I won't go too much into it, but I think we do have another story about one of the main creators of a jibby jab thing you put in your body, talking about how the pandemic was primarily faked through fake PCR tests and things like this to have the general public really buy into the uptake of the jibby jab. And coming from somebody that has that much credibility is really shocking if that is true. So, and we can also see countries that didn't do the jibby jab didn't have as many people pass away, and a lot of countries that did do it had no flu deaths that year, and it was the exact number of flu deaths for what ended up being jibby jab deaths and stuff like that.
And it's funny because the article itself does say exactly what we just said. So U.S. health officials on Friday endorsed the first blood test that can help diagnose Alzheimer's and identify patients who may benefit from drugs that can modestly slow the memory-destroying disease.
Yeah, I just, and it's a shame we're at this point now, but after the whole jibby jab era, science just can't be trusted. And with the failure of academia to actually stand up rather than being completely captured by big pharmaceuticals, big medicine, and progressive politics and things like this, they're really skewing and having biased studies come out, and they won't release real studies anymore that would show maybe the opposite to what they want their drug to do. They're allowed to do 10 studies and release the one that shows the good part.
Yes. And Rafa also says about him and Walker taking turns, says, like in wrestling, one enters in place of the other. Exactly. But we're glad you're both here.
And let's go into...
thank you for your support.
Maybe let's go into a little bit of Steve Bannon.
Oh, hold on. Because you're skipping one story, but okay. This one says the article is more than 4 months old. So has he said it a bunch of times now?
Yeah, this came back up recently with, you got an older article, the one I actually pulled. You can read this one, it's fine. I'm just going to talk about it in general. But with the South African immigrants coming back in, this is really coming back up to head. Him and Steve Bannon keep going head to head. So it's going to be interesting. Let's just look at Steve Bannon's original comments, but he made similar comments recently over the weekend, actually.
So Steve Bannon condemns Elon Musk as space, atheist and truly evil. Ex-Trump advisor denounces tech CEO's embrace of some forms of immigration and vows to take this guy down.
Yeah, he doesn't want South African immigrants coming into the country, which when this story first came up, I actually agreed with the South African immigrants being let in on refugee status if they were going to allow other people in on refugee status. But as you've seen on my Friday show, Trump actually ended that policy now, so nobody's coming in on refugee status. So I no longer think the United States should take the South Africans, even though I think they could be classified as refugees. I think they should be going to other countries. The problem with that is other countries will not classify them as refugees because the government is covering up the facts and completely hiding this. I've spoken out on South Africa a lot in the last few weeks, and I do believe everything that's said to be going on there is going on there because of the mountain of evidence that has piled up over the last decade. It's insurmountable basically at this point. But I do watch a lot of independent media, and it's surprising to see some of the right-wing media actually not believing the stories that are coming out of what's happening to the white farmers in South Africa. Maybe they just didn't pay attention to these documentaries that did come out over the last few decades. They were kind of fringe. One was a Canadian that did a documentary on South Africa, and the other one was a lady from the UK that did a documentary. Maybe if it was a US independent journalist, it would have got more exposure in the US. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think it just looks bad on Trump and the administration that they keep flip-flopping, and they're doing it because there's an internal war amongst the MAGA and the right wing about if they should take them, if they shouldn't, if they should completely cancel refugee and asylum seekers or not. So I think the fact that they're just going back and forth is not a good look.
it might not be a good look for the general public, but I think it is good because they made a big umbrella coalition, and the fact that Trump's not running all over certain elements of the coalition, but they're kind of duking it out right now on a lot of different issues. One would be migration and refugees and who's appropriate to let in, who's not appropriate to let in. But the other big talking point and where the big rift is, and I really come down on one side of this, and that is the military and military engagements of the U.S. overseas. A lot of people within MAGA have a populist nationalist view that think they should focus on their own borders and things like this, and should not engage in these endless wars overseas, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, Israel. They shouldn't be funding other countries' militaries. Let these regions work out their own political issues. Mm-hmm. I'm anti-war, so that's kind of where I come down, but...
And Walker also says, I'm just stopping by to listen to something informative and fun while I'm on my lunch break. It's always great to hear your opinions and information. And thank you for always being here and stopping by, and also coming to both the shows at night as well. And we also love to hear your opinions and Rafa's and everybody else's.
Well, yeah, not just Rafa and Walker. I know I only probably have 2 viewers at this point. But if anybody else is watching randomly, feel free to leave a comment if you're watching live. We will read it live on the show as long as it's respectful, meaning it's within YouTube TDS. Is it called TDS?
No, TOC term, the TNC terms and conditions, or like community guidelines.
Yeah, community guidelines. Yeah. So, I mean, I was watching a show about, I do a lot of production and a lot of equipment, and I was watching something about live streaming. And I had followed this guy forever, but I always watched his edited videos if I needed to know something. I didn't realize he had a live stream. His live stream popped up. I clicked on it, and man, I said, oh, okay, let me try to ask a question. And he answered it almost instantly, which was great because I'm like, oh, he's actually going to answer. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of tech questions. It was like having a tech expert there that I could actually ask questions to live. So it was great.
What's his name?
Oh, I can't remember right now. Yeah. And he's really French. It was specifically for like an ATEM, which is a switcher. A lot of people won't know.
Yes.
So I got a new segment at the end of the show where I'll talk different camera stuff, tech stuff, stuff like that. But yeah.
Because kind of one of the goals we've had and that we've discussed before to do with at least one of our channels is to also help empower other people to start talking about politics, start giving their opinions online. And for us, it was hard, for you especially, because you were the one that got all the equipment and did all the research mostly, to find things that would work, how they work.
Yeah.
This thing isn't connecting. Why not? Because, I mean, yes, we worked in the film industry and we're both interested in film and production, but we didn't really know that much.
Well, I knew nothing.
For live streaming and YouTube specifically, and cost-effective ways to do things as well. So one of our goals eventually is to help other people create channels, shows, and be able to give their opinions online as well.
And it was really hard when I was researching. You have to research sound, then videos, then lenses, then lighting. I mean, this and that. I worked in the film industry, but I still didn't know on a prosumer level how to do all this stuff, what the products were, why something was good, why something wasn't. I probably have years of knowledge of this stuff now. So I'm going to start talking about it a little bit more. We'll see if I end up doing a separate live stream on it another time. But yeah, let's keep going into the politics. I'll add the segment in at the end.
Yes.
And President Joe Biden, and this was the big headline for the weekend. A lot of people are talking about.
Hold on. I grabbed a different one.
Oh, okay. So former President Joe Biden diagnosed with prostate cancer. Why don't you read the rest of the headline there?
So Joe Biden diagnosed with aggressive form of prostate cancer.
Oh, and what was the other thing? It's
metastasizing. Apparently, it has metastasized to his bones, which means it has infiltrated his bones. It's a lot more aggressive than when you're just diagnosed with stage 1 or 2.
And it's metastasized into his bones, and this usually takes a decade. So there was rumors coming out he needed to be in a wheelchair. Part of the reason he needs to be in the wheelchair most likely is because of the cancer in his bones. People knew about this and they were covering it up during his administration, and that's obvious at this point. A lot of people are coming out in support of him right now and wishing him the best, but I think secretly behind closed doors, people like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris and just a slew of politicians in Washington are hoping he passes away because he has a lot of dirt on a lot of people. He was one of the most corrupt politicians for decades and decades and decades. So he made deals and he could potentially blow the whistle on a lot of people. So people will be happy to see him pass away. At least politicians will.
And also all the pardons and all the things he did right before he left are also starting to kind of come into question, at least with all of those investigations and the commissions that are being formed around J6 and also maybe even Fauci. So this is a good way to distract to bring it out now. But there's been something wrong with him clearly for at least since he was campaigning.
Yeah, I don't think this surprises anybody at all. But I will say this. What were you just saying?
The pardons?
The pardons.
The commissions, the investigations.
The pardons that he gave out with the auto pin, supposedly they can't find where he approved the auto pin to be used for those pardons. Mm-hmm. And they're finding evidence that other people actually approved the auto pin, which is not supposed to happen. I think they're bringing this up so it's in the general public's mind, but they're going to wait to challenge it until after he passes away, if they do, because then he can't come out and say, oh no, I approved it. Mm-hmm. They'll have to rely on the evidence that's kind of there, who approved the auto pin and things like this. And that's a way they may be able to take away the pardons, especially for Fauci.
And also with that clip that's coming out again about his cognitive abilities, according to when they were doing an investigation and they said that he can't stand trial, this is another way to be like, oh, but he also was dealing with this. And let's not talk about his mental acuity anymore. Let's talk about how he's very sick.
Oh, yeah.
And Rafa says, me and a couple of friends always said that we should create a podcast talking about politics, but never did anything.
Well, it's hard. Nobody likes to watch it.
Yeah, politics is a hard kind of niche to enter into. Number one, because it's saturated in English. And number two, because in Spanish, we've realized the way to get into it is through pop culture, which is why I, at least in Spanish, do a lot of pop culture stuff. Yeah. Because just there's not that interest, and in the States it took a long time to build it up, 10 plus years, and now just finally people are getting into it more as a kind of like a pop culture avenue as well, discussing it, but it's gonna take a while. And it's
more than a full-time job. It's our entire life. We live in a production studio. Our apartment is literally just cameras, microphones, lighting every room. We have our one little bedroom was the only place, but even there you have a little desk that pulls into the bed so you can edit late at night and things like this, and it doesn't pay anything. So it's really hard. But it's also sure eventually, hopefully it will, but it's also important to tell people you don't need this level of production to do it. And I think in Spanish especially, more voices are needed, even if it is, as we say, anonymous or through an avatar, or however you can do it or feel comfortable doing it. There needs to be more voices in Spanish talking about politics, making it interesting for people, aside from the traditional media and commentators and López Dóriga and all of those that are just boring to most people. Make it entertaining, and I think younger voices are also how you do that. Yeah, and I'm going to say this again because I'm hoping people hear us and actually steal these ideas, and that is especially in Mexico and Latin America where there is a lot of violence with politics. Our faces are attached to this channel, so we can't do this anymore. And so sometimes I will intentionally shy away from certain stories within Mexico and things like that because I don't want any blowback. But people that haven't attached their face to their channel are able to do it anonymously with just their voice or have an avatar for themselves. So they have anonymity and they can talk openly and honestly about these topics. Where other people can't. They can honestly have open and honest debates as well, which is going to be very important in the future in Mexican and Latin American politics.
Mm-hmm. And Rafa also says Hillary Clinton. Exactly.
Yeah. All happy. A lot of stuff is coming out over the weekend about Hillary Clinton and all the people that have passed away, and there's evidence kind of mounting up. Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's go into Vice President J.D. Vance. And if we remember, a lot of people are calling him God's left hand, I believe it is. I think it's his left hand, not right hand. That's the archangel of death.
Okay.
If we remember, he was the last one to really have the public meeting with the last pope before he passed away. So
apparently there's also some rumors or just conspiracy theories that Leo the 14th, I believe in some show, or some media was said like before this Pope was elected, or it was even in the eye of that he could be the Pope, that whenever there was going to be a Pope Leo the 14th, he would not be there for a long time, and then they would elect the Black Pope, and then that would be the apocalypse.
What do you mean he won't be there for a long time?
That he's going to pass away shortly.
Who, Pope Leo the...
Yeah, apparently. I don't remember what show it was or what thing it was. Probably a cartoon. One like Simpsons or something like that.
Well, it's not... Alex Jones talks a lot about this, and he has a mountain of evidence when it comes to this. They kind of implant these stories through TV series and things like this, so it's in the public consciousness. They did this before 9/11, and then 9/11 happened 9 months later. They also did this with the train incident that happened in Palestine, Ohio, and it actually happened in Palestine, Ohio in the series, which is almost impossible to happen. But Alex Jones has dozens and dozens of examples where they plant these stories, and then a few months or a year later, they actually happen to an uncanny likability that it's going to have that many details associated with it. So I wouldn't doubt something like that.
But this is going deep into conspiracy.
Yeah, but I'm a big conspiracy person, even though you're not.
Yeah.
Okay, let's actually read some of this article before I go down a conspiracy rabbit hole.
So J.D. Vance gives Pope Leo XIV a Trump invitation to visit the U.S. U.S. President J.D. Vance extended an invitation to Pope Leo XIV to visit the U.S. during a meeting at the Vatican on Monday ahead of a flurry of U.S.-led diplomatic efforts to make progress on a ceasefire in Russia's war in Ukraine. Vance gave the first American Pope a letter from Trump to invite him to go to the States.
Yeah. And let's remember the last Pope was talking about going to Russia as well. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories that say when the Pope does go to Russia, that this is going to kind of usher in end times and things like this. This is one of the big talking points. That being said, let's remember when this first happened, the first day, I think I went on air and I was talking about my theory. And we're going to see if my theory is right, which nobody else has, or the general consensus, which is they elected an American Pope to kind of go against Donald Trump and separate the nation between politics and church. And that's kind of the mainstream traditionalist view on this Pope. My thing was, I thought they elected an American Pope because of USAID and a lot of other inner workings of the Vatican Bank, and the corruption within the Vatican was being uncovered, and it was uncovered by Doge and the Trump administration. They needed to make good with that administration, and they needed an American Pope to kind of do that and bridge that gap so they can kind of sweep things under the rug. Right now, it's more important than ever. If a lot of this corruption actually surfaces on a mainstream level, it could end the church. I mean, they were completely funding the ending of babies and things like this through NGOs, open borders through NGOs, feminist ideology through NGOs, the CIA. Actually, documents were released about the CIA through the Trump administration saying they specifically targeted the Vatican and the Vatican Bank to fund a lot of these things, because people wouldn't look at a conservative organization to fund a lot of these non-conservative ideals, I would say.
And also, even before Doge, the Vatican Bank and another Vatican arm of financing was being investigated, and Francis was actually doing a lot to both quell it and apologize and try to keep it on the DL, on the down low, for a long time as well. So that was even before Doge. So they've had this issue for a long time.
So I think the J.D. Vance meeting is going to usher in a Trump meeting. And shortly after that, we're going to see what's happening here. Is he aligning with the administration? If he does, I would suspect that's to sweep their finances under the rug. Or is it to go directly at Trump and kind of divide the nation and make people choose between politics and religion? So it's going to be very obvious in their actions. They can say whatever they want to say, but their actions are going to speak louder than their words coming up.
Walker says, it's a shame Catholics still have a pope like that. I'm not very religious, but for now, here in my country, evangelicals and Protestants are the ones putting up the most fight against the woke. And he also says Catholics have simply given up and accepted their fate, which is a cascading loss of parishioners.
Yeah, and that's what I said when I seen this, because there was a lot of Catholic influencers and stuff, because I do watch Catholic news, even though I'm not Catholic, that were very upset at this appointment, but then they just accepted it. And they said, well, this is our new pope. We have to accept it. And it's like they need to push back.
Yes.
And that being said, in his country, it's evangelicals kind of pushing.
And Protestants.
In a lot of Western countries, such as the United States, Canada, and Europe, that pushback is coming from Eastern Orthodox, which is separate from traditional Catholicism. They don't follow the Pope.
Yes, because in Canada, the US, Europe, Protestantism and evangelicals are the ones that are actually bringing in a lot of the wokeness, like bringing in female pastors and LGBTQ being accepted into the church, et cetera, et cetera. That's where they're starting to hang on those woke flags and they're starting to plant them.
Yeah, but it was good when Walker was talking about at least evangelicals in South America seem to be pushing back against it.
Yes.
So I guess every region is a little bit different, but as long as there are people pushing back against it, no matter who it is a good thing. And that's kind of the point of this channel.
And Rafa says, I do have faith in this Pope. We'll have to wait and see. He said some good things, but then again, is he just doing lip service to the things people want to hear and then turn completely against it? Or the other way around, is he actually believing those things? It's very early on. It's only been a few weeks.
Yeah, so far from what I've been able to gather, he seems like a globalist, but we're going to see on his interaction specifically with Donald Trump. Does he want to sweep the finances under the rug and make good with the administration, or is he going to go toe-to-toe with a globalist ideology against Trump? So is he going to make friend or foe? That will dictate kind of why I think they picked an American pope, because it was extremely controversial them picking an American pope, and it was unexpected.
Mm-hmm. And Walker says, yes, it's strange. It's the opposite here in El Salvador. And at least there's some pushback. Like, regardless of where it's coming from, at least there's some... Because it also in Latin America, I'll just say quickly, I could get into this for a long time, but in Latin America, the Catholic Church has been very linked and tied to the left and has been infiltrated for decades and decades by leftist ideology and has
Jesuits.
been... And the Jesuits, and has been used as a cudgel to bring people more towards the left and socialism and ideals that a lot of the quasi or actual dictators have taken upon. And it's been a way to move people towards that through Catholicism.
Okay, let's go into the next story. And the next story is your big story. And I kind of was sitting over at the production table and you were sitting over here editing. I said, oh, Natalia, look at the X that I bookmarked. She goes, oh God, what is it now? And so she looks, and it's the Mexican ship accident that happened in Brooklyn, New York with the Brooklyn Bridge. And she's been researching this for 2 days straight now. And it was kind of like a meme thing that I kind of put in here. I was going to talk briefly, but she knows so much about this thing now. It is crazy.
Yes, I'm going to talk about it in my Spanish.
Talk about it a little bit now,
live.
because you know much more than I did. I just saw the videos. Why don't we play the video to start so people know what we're talking about?
I think people will know, but okay.
And that's
So there's multiple videos, but this is just one.
Yeah, that's the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. And if you see the sails, there are people standing up top there. So this was very dangerous.
I'm not going to put sound because there's music behind it.
Oh. And the masts did break, and it did hit the top of the Brooklyn Bridge. From the other angle, you can see sparks, and it almost caused a fire. But a lot of people did get injured and passed away from this.
So yes, 2 passed away now, 2 young cadets, 19 injured after a Mexican Navy sailboat crashes into Brooklyn Bridge. Mayor says nearly 300 people were aboard at the time of the crash, according to officials. And
talk about everything you've been researching a little bit.
So the thing is, I need to talk about it more later. But
don't talk about the whole thing. But when I first saw it, it looked like they intentionally drove into the bridge, and that wasn't the case.
No, and a lot of discussion was going on online, both in Spanish and in English. Surprisingly, at first, of course, it looked like they were intentionally trying to do it, but no, the boat was actually going in reverse. It was trying to leave the dock and actually go the other way, the opposite side of the East River, down south, essentially. The Brooklyn Bridge and Manhattan Bridge are both up north. And it seems like there has been no determinations, but I've been watching a few maritime experts and people that have worked in shipping and have crossed up those docks and up New York for decades. I'll actually recommend the channels in a bit. Saying that what it looks like is that the ship lost power in its motor. The power for the lights and the power for the motor are completely different. Those kinds of sailboats don't have front motors, so they can't actually steer or do anything once their main motor loses power. And then it was dragged by the current, which was very strong. You can see the wind there. It was about 3 or 4 knots, and that's what made it crash backwards into the Brooklyn Bridge. It was not intentional. They were not trying to go that way. The people standing up on the masts and or the yards, which is what they're called in shipping terms, they usually do that as display. It's a display that they do. They get the young cadets to do that. It's a very old maritime tradition, and they conserve that tradition. This is not the only ship of its kind. There's a lot of training ships for the U.S., for basically every country, and what they do is they sail around the world in like a goodwill effort. And here they were training, and they were in New York to train for some event, I believe July the 4th, but I don't remember what it was. And it's normal. They are actually harnessed into the masts or the yards, but still it's not enough protection when there's actually a collision that big.
Did you say there was an American overseer on the ship?
So it appears one of the flags that were displayed on the ship at the time of it leaving the dock was one to indicate that there is kind of a guidance captain that works for the U.S. Port Authority, usually, to help them guide them out of the New York docks, because it's really hard to do. They also had a tugboat that wasn't attached, but was actually trying to help steer them in the right direction to get into the proper current. But as soon as the boat lost power, those efforts were null and void, essentially, because the tugboat wasn't actually attached, which they can't attach them because the New York Port Authority, according to this shipping expert guy, don't have enough tugboats, so they don't do the attaching them anymore. They actually just push the boats and kind of let them go on their way. So yes, there appears to be a flag for a captain helping direct the boat on board, which then gets off on the tugboat and then lets the sailboat go on its way. But after the whole issue, of course, both in maritime law, just the captain of the actual ship is at fault for the crash or whatever happens. So you're going to
talk more about it tonight, so we'll get into it then as well, because that's, I think, your main story in Spanish. So if you do watch your Spanish segments,
yes,
she's going to go very in depth on this.
And I've done a lot of research because it's a tragedy, and I am annoyed and angry at a lot of the discourse online, both from Mexicans and Americans.
Yeah.
The Americans saying, what's a Navy ship doing in the U.S.? They're trying to attack us. And it's like, no, it's a goodwill ship. They go all over the world. It happens for every single country. And they were cadets in training, so they were very young people just trying to learn, be a part of the Mexican Navy. And then from the Mexicans, making it all political and trying to choose sides. As soon as there's loss of life, I think those jokes and discussions should be set aside.
Oh, yeah.
And especially when it's young lives. It was a female and a male that lost their lives. And a few others that are still fighting for their lives.
Of them medevacing the people off the boat that were injured, had a lot of blood.
Yeah.
So...
And it was very obvious it was critical. But
that being said, don't go into any more articles. I'm going to do my final segment here in a minute, where we talk about production equipment, things like that.
And so Walker says, yes, Ion Pasiba, an ex-KGB agent, in his book Program to End Lives, said how the KGB infiltrated the Catholic Church. Of course, not surprising. A lot of things have infiltrated the Catholic Church. Rafa also says, why do those ladies have blankets over their heads? I thought it was the USA. Yeah, some of the videos show a lot of Muslim women, let's just say, on the docks there, strolling on a Saturday evening. And Walker also says, I saw that this morning. The loss of those people is tragic. And I think that's what should be the main headline.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of whose fault it is, the political aspect, the Mexicans are attacking, or the whole Drinko de Mayo comments as well. I did not find funny, but...
Yeah. I was making a lot of jokes about it because I thought it was funny at first, but then I realized it was a tragedy, and a lot of people ended up dying, and it was a lot more serious than it looked right
but
then.
A lot ended up injured.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into the final segment. If anybody is thinking about making a podcast of any sort, but especially politics, I like to see people actually speak up and take the risk going into politics, kind of what we had. It really does help change the discourse. Every time you speak up against something, or you can really shape the dialogue that's going on. So I'll talk a little bit about different equipment over the next few weeks as my final segment, whether it's microphones, lighting, things like this. Today I'll talk a little bit about cameras and things like this, but the single best camera anybody has, whether you know it or not, is your phone. By far, it's the most versatile. This is something I still use when we go out a lot, especially if we're going to do a protest. You don't want a full camera. You can become a target of theft, of violence. If you look too much like you're against what's going on there and you have a camera, they're not going to like it. Everybody has a phone, so when you're taking a picture of somebody with a phone, it's far less aggressive. You blend in a lot more, things like this. Mm-hmm. Also, it's very unlikely to get taken. You're able to put it in your pocket, while another phone you're not able to hide even when you want to. You have to put it in your bag at best if you want to completely conceal it, and bags can often get stolen, or you become a target when you have a large bag as well.
Mm-hmm. And the footage actually comes out pretty well. I mean, our phones are pretty old by now.
I'm going to tell you this, footage from a phone comes out better than one of my expensive $2,000 or $3,000 cameras, because it's going to auto expose. And when you're just running and gunning and you just need usable shots, the phone always gets the usable shot. Too many things can go wrong with a high-end camera on location and things like that. I like the high-end cameras for talking heads and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That being said, these phones are so advanced now and they integrate with apps so well. It's a much cheaper way to get started, and especially if you're doing multicam and stuff like this, it's much better. We ended up buying a lot of equipment and things like that because my back was going out, and all the jobs I had done previously were all physical jobs. I knew I could only do a physical job for 3 or 4 more years, and I had to switch my career. I decided to switch my career into owning a small production company. That way I could pivot if something didn't work. If I wasn't able to figure out video, I could go into photo. If I didn't do well in a podcast format, I could do a documentary format, things like this.
And producing for others. We also produced for other people for a while in Vancouver as well.
So I ended up buying all this equipment because I knew I was going to be able to work 110 hours a week for 3 or 4 years. So I wanted to buy everything, so I had a base to go into my new career, mm-hmm. which that's kind of why I have a lot of equipment. But you don't need a lot of the kind of equipment that we do have.
No, and nowadays there's also cheap microphones, even on Amazon, that work pretty much as good as the expensive ones.
Yeah, everything is really cheap now, especially if you know what you're buying, but you should really educate yourself. And if anybody has any questions, put them in the comments. I will answer them. I'll tell you the cheapest, most effective way. I'm not associated with any cameras or camera brands. I know when I was doing the research and trying to figure out, what camera do I need? What microphone do I need? People promote a lot of different products, and they won't speak ill about these products because they don't want to destroy their relationship
with the brands
that are actually giving them free equipment. I don't have any free equipment. I bought all of mine. Mm-hmm. And even when they do talk bad about the brand, it's very briefly. They just glaze over it. They don't actually talk in depth why that product is bad. They go straight to the good points.
Mm-hmm. And with phones, I mean, as I quickly mentioned, we don't have the newest phones either. Like, I think mine's an iPhone 12 or 13.
Mine's a 13.
Mine's a 13 or 14.
And I will... go ahead.
But I mean, the footage that comes out, if you know, and maybe we can talk about that more, or use specific apps, or if you know how to do the proper angles, lighting, how to use autofocus, and how to use all of those features that are within your phone already. Footage doesn't have to come out like you usually see crappy cell phone footage. It's just knowing how to manipulate it so you get the footage you want. And you can also use it for talking heads.
And it doesn't come out like crappy cell phone footage when you're actually on location just trying to get a protest or something. It it's the equivalent of what you're going to do with these DSLRs or mirrorless cameras, because the mirrorless cameras, there's just so many things to change for each scene. The cell phone footage most of the time comes out looking better.
And it's funny that we see sometimes when we go to protests, these big hulking cameras for the mainstream media having to lug them around and run around. And yes, they're experts. And yes, it's a craft. And yes, it's going to be lost eventually. But it does seem ridiculous to see them trying to do all this when we're just running around with 2 cell phones.
We run and gun and we get better footage, and it's far more versatile. We're less of a target. We can go one side to the protest to the other extremely quickly.
And get things that like happen in the moment.
Yeah. So that being said, I was going to say something else. There are wireless mics and things like this that go into the phone and connect wirelessly. I'll go into that in the future. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about the actual cameras that we use. We use Fujifilm cameras. Mm-hmm. And
which is not a very common camera brand to use.
Not a common camera in Mexico. They're very expensive, actually, because of tariff fees and import fees.
But in general, for people that film things, they use Canons. Everybody always recommends Canon. We learned that that's not the way to go.
Canon's not the way to go either. The reason Canon was so established was because of their photography and the photography industry and their long history in that. If I had to redo it again, would I necessarily buy Fuji? Yes, because I like photography and videography, and Fujifilm is a photography-centric camera, I think. But if I were to advise somebody else going into this that wants to use more than their phone, I would always recommend the phone first, is to go with Sony. Sony is the most versatile. They own the middle of the market. They're a safe camera with the most research and development. It's the easiest return, the easiest to fix. They have the most investment money. Fujifilm kind of exists like a bipolar child. It's on both ends of the sphere. What do I mean by that? Sony has what's called full frame cameras, and that's the majority of cameras. Fujifilm has a small sensor, so the cameras are typically smaller, and then they have a really big sensor called the GFX, and that's on the opposite end of the spectrum. That being said, what I was going to say was...
I mean, actual camera recommendations, we can do in another.
No, we're doing another. Oh, but I was going to talk about something else here, and that was... when I first got into this, I started with a mirrorless camera. I chose Fuji, and my intention was to go into videography, and that completely failed. You can watch our first videos on our other channel, and I was trying to do things even before those first videos, and those first videos came out horribly. I worked overtime and was able to get something that's actually watchable and looks good now. But the way I was able to do that, rather than giving up on videography, was say, okay, well, my back's going to give out. This is a permanent decision in my life. I'm going to learn photography first and use all those photography principles, and then try videography again. And it worked. Photography was still very complex to learn, but I got to learn all the basics, the exposure triangle, about lenses, all kinds of different things. It gave me the base, how to compose a shot, how to compose the rule of thirds. All the same rules that go into photography pretty much apply to videography. But if you're trying to do it with videography, you're going to be overwhelmed and you're probably going to fail. So I always recommend doing photography first. So I started doing street photography on my own. Once I learned the basic ins and outs of the camera, I got like a minimum wage job with, I think it was a real estate
company to take indoor shots of listings.
Of listings and properties, just to learn that aspect of photography. And then I went into food photography. I did some restaurants and bars and drinks. And then I went into grad photography, which we would go into high schools with a company. And after I had that base, I tried videography again. I knew the ins and outs. I knew a lot of photography, and it made videography so much easier at that point. There was a lot of things I still didn't know, but the majority of the basics I had a footing with. So if you're trying to get into videography and you fail at the beginning, just go into photography. Do it as a hobby to begin with. And then if you can, try to get a job and you can see how other people do it. And one thing that really did benefit me about all those photography jobs I got was the pace in which they worked. And that's kind of what's applying now that we're learning how to do it. You have to cut a lot of corners, especially when you were trying to do 3 shows a day plus publish videos. You're not going to necessarily get the most cinematic, best content out. You're going to have to cut corners. And with the companies that I work for, there were lower end companies that were higher end people that had no experience. But that were motivated to work. So they did cheap work. And it really showed me, sometimes you do have to cut corners, but where's the most important place to cut corners to get the highest quality of work you can get, and still put out content every day, especially with politics. This is a daily thing we have to do 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. So,
and also learning how to hide those cut corners and how to still make it look good, or that the corners that you're cutting are things that people don't notice because they might not, like someone that's not well versed in videography, photography, sound would know or would notice.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this a little bit. Maybe on the next episode, I'll go into microphones and things like this, because when we're talking about mics, we're not just talking about these big mics here. I'm talking about like little lapel mics that you can hide, little wireless transmitters that work with not only the bigger camera you're watching me on, but they work with the phones now, which is fantastic. But microphones are so important because buying the proper microphone could save your ass, because if you buy a cheap little mic that doesn't have like a 32-bit float and the sound file is just distorted because things are too loud, you won't be able to save the file. But if you have a proper mic and know how to use it properly, you can always save the audio file.
And this is getting into ins and outs that probably have their own little segment.
Yeah, but I will say audio is more important than visual, because if somebody can't hear you properly, they're not going to watch. If a lot of people only watch without a visual, they'll listen on their headphones at work and stuff like this. So audio is the single most important part, I think.
Yeah, it's not actually video. A lot of people think it's video and they have to get these big cameras and then their audio sucks. And that's why sometimes they get less views. So audio is actually way more important than video. And I think not a lot of people talk about that either.
Also, something that goes in the audio that's not equipment based is actually being able to talk on and off camera, whether it's an on-camera podcast or off camera. I still hate doing it. I still suck at doing it. In the beginning, I hated doing it so much. I just did a voiceover, and then I said, this isn't for me. I'm going to get somebody else that's an actor or that I think has a personality, and we try to have them go on camera. It kind of worked, but they're not committed to the long-term vision that you have. So ultimately, I have to be the one going on camera. And I have Nat as well, which is, I'm very lucky because there's no way I could have done this as a 1-person team.
Yes, no.
So if you're thinking about getting into this, either find a friend or somebody that will do it with you.
But I mean, you can do it by yourself if you have enough conviction and practice.
Yeah, but
enough.
It takes a huge weight off of you.
Yes. And Rafa says, it would be interesting to know more about guys' previous jobs. And Walker says, their programs are really high quality, so it's very noticeable that you know the business. Thank you. We knew some aspects, but also with film industry, or if you just study film or try to start to get into it in a professional manner, you learn how to do very specific things very well, but you don't learn all of it. No. So even if someone might be, I don't know, a sound engineer or an editor, they only know how to do that one thing very well. So when you're trying to go off and do it by yourself and learn everything, it is a lot more work and overwhelming. And there are things you just won't know because you never focused in that area when you were working in the industry.
Yeah.
The industry pigeonholes you into knowing one thing very well, very specifically.
Yeah. And I would recommend, if you are going on to YouTube or something, to start with an audio only podcast that would teach you the audio. And the audio is the most important when you do go into a visual podcast as well. And it's going to teach you how to speak publicly, how to get your talking points together, how to just be confident. I mean, I still don't have this down after years. Nat's a lot better at it than I am, but start with an audio only podcast and then go on into video and stuff like that on YouTube. Okay, I guess that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in every day at 12 p.m. Central Time. I have my show here. We're right back here at 9:15 Central Time with Nat and the Guy Live. That's me and Nat. We're both on camera. That's our main show. And Nat has her own show at, why don't you give the information for that?
In Spanish at Nat and the Guy en Español at 8 p.m. Central.
And Nat and the Guy Espanol is a separate channel. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. We'll see you back here later tonight.
And thank you, Walker, Rafa, and everybody watching. And thank you for your comments. And we'll see you tomorrow.